Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Rogue Deck Chronicles. I am Dean, and once again, I have Devin with me.
Hey everybody, hopefully everyone had a good Easter weekend. I know I did. I was able to enjoy Disney on the Saturday of Easter, so I definitely had a good weekend.
How was that? Because typically that's like one of the busiest times of the year at Disney, as someone that goes quite often too.
So we were able to do the Pirates of the Caribbean with like 5 minute wait, and then we just kind of walked around the rest of it. We didn't really want to go. Everything else had like a 90-minute wait. Like we didn't want to do anything
Mhm.
crazy. We just kind of walked around. We went to Hollywood Studios for the bulk of the afternoon and kind of just walked around. I basically just hung out in Star Wars. So
Gotcha, yeah.
met met Chewie, met Ray, that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Well, hopefully next year we'll have a regional in Orlando and we can maybe make an excuse to play Pokemon and do Disney. So, Pokemon, if you're listening, that's
Come
some good
back.
come back. Let us come back. Come on. But I heard Atlanta was fun. But other than Disney, anything Pokemon related in the past week for you?
Not really. I mean, I I'm doing the Horizons event in Pokemon Go at the time of recording. Today's the last day of it, but I got the shiny cap hat Pikachu during the event, which was really cool. Kristen actually got a shiny Lico's pin uh, mas Masquerada, the middle
Oh, nice.
evolution. She got that while we were at Disney. Like we were in line, and she's like, "Look," I'm like, "Of course you get the shiny costume Pokemon." She loves shiny costume Pokemon. That's the reason why she plays Go. So she wants my shiny Cap Pat Pikachu. So I'm like, I'll trade it to you later. I don't care. But nothing crazy. Like I don't. Since with the regionals kind of sparse right now, I haven't really dived deep into TCG. How about you?
Well, I'm making some travel plans right now. So at the time of recording, right before this, NEIC registration just opened up, and I was lucky enough to make it past Wave One. So I'm going to my first international championships.
That's gonna be fun. I've never been to an IC as like the structure it has been. I've been to U.S. Nationals. I went to the last U.S. Nationals as a spectator, and that was an absolute blast. And I've heard stories of ICs. I have friends who've been to ICs as spectators and competitors, and I think you're going to enjoy it. And it's in New Orleans this year, right?
Yeah, it was there last year, and I saw all the stuff with it. So I'm excited. I haven't really been playing, practicing as much, but now it's giving me an excuse to kind of like really dig deep and hone my skills some more. I was messaging you a little bit earlier, kind of
Hmm.
looking at where I was at with my CP and my goals I made for this year.
Yeah.
And ever since they announced the Ace Trainer status, that's my new goal. I'm at 169 championship points. Um, a decent finish at NEIC can get me there so easily, or I can get a finish with at a cup since I do have some of those left to fill in.
Hmm.
So just trying to figure out, okay, how do I get to this goal? And now I'm at the point of like trying to pick a deck that will get me there.
And the NAIC is going to be the last event of the season, correct? If
Yes,
you're telling me the season kind of timeline. So that would be the last event of the season, and then it goes into the new competitive season in terms of CP earning events.
correct. Yeah. So those who don't know, all local events has to be done by May 31st. That is the last day any store can host a challenge or a cup. And then after that, the only other event that we can go to as competitors is NAIC. And then once NAIC is done, whatever points you have is what you earn, and we'll see who makes top 125 and who gets auto invites. And everyone else will just have to try again for next year.
Gotcha. So speaking of regionals and speaking of events during the season, there was one last weekend during Easter
Yes, there
weekend
was.
in Monterrey, and there's overall I would say there's no real surprises, no real nice juicy story plots, other than like three rogue decks that I saw in the midst of all of the of the day 2 list. And honestly, I think 2 of them wouldn't even be considered rogue. I think they're more of the up and coming fringy decks that are going to be probably part of tier 2, tier 1.5 in the next month or so, right?
Yeah, so as we mentioned, we had a regional in Mexico, in Monterrey, Mexico, so in the Latin American region. And it was, let me see how many people. This is actually a
1327.
pretty big tournament for Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Yeah.
just over 1,300 masters. And I know this was a big deal because this is actually one of the first years that Mexico has had a actual regional. I think they've had special events in the past, so now they got more. They got to the regional status, which means you can get prize money, you can get points, booster prizing, the whole shebang. It's not just okay, you're there just to get CP and hopefully a couple packs for your prizing. There's actually the cash prizing involved. And this was won by none other than the number one ranked Pokemon trainer in the whole entire world, Brent Tonneson, which is not a surprise because he goes to every single regional,
Yeah.
like every regional worldwide.
I mean, with the reputation he has, with like the resources he has, I mean, it makes it worth it. Like when you go into your day twoing regionals left, right, and center, you definitely can afford to do that. And Guardy got another placement. It is, I don't know if it's going to, I wouldn't say Guardy is king of the format right now. I would argue Guardy's probably number 2, and it's a solid number 2,
Mhm.
and Dragapult is the king.
I agree. I think if we're gonna go tier system, Dragapult is either S or 1, and then Gardevoir is definitely lower 1, if not high 2, if we're gonna go with who is like the BDIF.
Mm-hmm.
But they're both really strong decks, and depending on what other decks are in the room that day, either one is a good call to bring to a tournament.
Yeah,
But with that being said, you better be good with the mirror of whatever deck you're playing because everyone else is thinking the same thing.
I think Guardy is inching closer to 1. I think the gap between Guardy and Dragapult was fairly massive after Atlanta. But I think even after a week of kind of everyone digesting the meta and evaluating the meta, I think obviously Brett's win kind of inflates that perception. But I think Guardy is just recrafting itself to be a deck that is safer than Dragapult for the right type of players.
Yeah, I believe with Guardy, you can set up a later and still do fine. Yes, Dragapult can do that too, but I will say if you don't have a good board state by like turn 3 or 4 with Dragapult, your likelihood of winning it's going to be hard. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to be low versus Gardevoir where it can wait a little bit because it doesn't need much to set up. It plays heavy rare candy count. You're not relying on that Corellia anymore for your draw power, and all your attackers are basic Pokemon except for if you want to attack with Gardevoir. And really, you want damage on your board as a Gardevoir player because you play all those Monkey Dories now, and that's honestly the biggest shift I've seen in the format with play testing multiple decks. I'm seeing a lot more Monkey Dory being added in every single list.
Yeah, and that's the weird part to me. I think we talked about it last week, where if you're not sure what to add to the deck, just put a Monkey Dory or 2 in. If your deck can run a Luminous or a Darkness Energy of any degree,
Mm-hmm.
just throw it in and move on, kind of deal.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to think about that. It's I feel like it's like, oh, I don't know what to do. Like, Monkey Doris is really strong. It's kind of like when Badoo was first introduced.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know what card to add. I'll just add Badoo because item lock is really good. Well, manipulating damage on your board to your opponents is really good as well.
Yeah.
And it can set up multiple KOs on like just an hour ago when I was playing on live. I did the same exact thing. I found a deck. I've been practicing a deck that has Monkey Dory in it, and I took 5 prize cards in one turn, which is me moving Monkey Dory damage around because I just had so much on my board. And not saying it's a bad move, not saying it's good. Um, I think it just goes with creativity. But with that being said, I feel like people are being creative and using this known strategy and bringing Pokemon out of nowhere and making them the star of the show. And we see that very well with the second place deck being the Blissey v Monkey Dory deck.
Yeah, like when I saw Blissey, not even just top cut, but get runner up in this, I'm like, what is this deck? And I open it up, I'm like, oh, it has 4 Monkey Dory, 4 Blissey. I'm like, what is it? And I look at the energy count, 7 Darkness energy. I'm like, okay, this wants you to do Monkey Dory, and then you're just doing return and filling up your hand with Blissey. I get it. I can see the general strategy. And then you're kind of just, you have a psychic energy to attack with Mind Bend if you need to. You have the fighting energy to attack with the Cornerstone Ogerpon if you need to. And it's just one of those situations where I think this deck is just, it covers bases. I don't think it does anything really excellent, but it does a lot of things very good.
Yeah, it's like you said, it covers its bases really well. Blissey EX is very hard to one-shot. Only a few decks can do that, and that is Goldango, Raging Bolt. But you're making your opponent use a lot of resources because 300 HP is very bulky, and it plays that Rigid Band, so then it's now 330 HP. So if you're Goldango, you're making them discard 7 energy, and if you're Raging Bolt, you're just making them discard 6 energy. That's a lot of energy to get into play or into your hand. And everything else is not one-shotting it, not very easily. And you're like, well, what about the Cornerstone Ogerpons out there? That's a fighting, and it's weak to fighting. Well, no, because the effect of the Cornerstone attacks is you do not count weakness.
Yeah,
so you're doing 140, and then with all those Monkey Dories, you're not doing any damage because all that's going to go back onto your board.
Yeah, and really, like I laugh, I giggle. I'm like, well, the best deck against this deck is Mamoswine. Yeah. But then the Cornerstone Ogerpon counters Mamoswine a little bit, so you have to be a little cheeky with the setup. But like Mamoswine can take out if they just overcommit on Blissies or overcommit Glissey and Monkey Dory, then you can just take 6 prizes that way. But I think if you would take this deck and you would flip over and be like, oh, I'm playing against Mamoswine, you wouldn't even worry about the Monkey Dory. You try to set up that Cornerstone as quick as possible and just say, you can't beat me. But
yeah, which unless you play a Pokemon in your Mamoswine deck that doesn't have an ability, which is very few to be honest. I know we feature one with the Garchomp EX, so that would be a good addition. And I know a lot of people are playing the Annihilate, where it just KOs both active Pokemon, and it being a single prizer versus multi-prizer, you're going to win out at the end. But yeah, Blissey is just very tanky. It can manipulate the damage that was put on it and put it back on your opponent's board. It just does things really well. I know Gardevoir is a very hard matchup for this just because it can do the same strategy but a little better.
Yeah.
And you see that with Brent winning with Gardevoir and not having the Blissey EX. And then you can make the arguments like, well, is Blissey EX really that good of a deck? Or is it the pilot? Because if we look at who piloted this deck, is none other than the current world champion, Fernando Cifuentes.
Yeah, but Blissey also made other appearances in Day 2. Probably, I'm looking and seeing the same nationality, all Chilean players. But I think Blissey has a couple things going for it, especially for someone who gravitates toward maybe rogue or off-meta decks. Obviously, it has a result that makes you feel comfortable that it's kind of been piloted and tested. That way, if you don't feel like testing it, you kind of feel comfortable with that. Another piece to me is the price point. It's less than $50.
Yeah.
That's something you can pick up, and I'm sure a lot of players probably have majority of the cards in their binder. Like, I'm sure everyone has Twilight Masquerade Chansey. If you don't have 4 Monkey Dory in your binder now, you probably should at this point. And
Mhm.
then nothing else in the list is super expensive except for the A spec, which is Precious Trolley, and then
Mhm.
that's really
Arvins are.
it.
I would say the Arvins are a little expensive, but at the same time, that should be a staple you have.
Yeah,
Arvin, Research, Iono, Boss, you should have at least 4 of in your collection, just
yeah,
because you use them in almost every single deck. But yeah, you brought up a great point. This is a very cheap deck to make. Even if you don't have the Blissies, you can just get them for like $1 each.
yeah.
So
They're
if you want to
legitimate.
order a deck right now, this is the perfect deck to play and buy.
Yeah, like we're talking like the Pokemon line, 14 Pokemon, 4, 6, 8. All the Pokemon are less than $10.
Yeah.
Like majority of the price in this list is exactly what you're saying. It's the 4 Pokegears and the 4 Arvins. Those 8 cards are
Mhm.
18 out of the $48.
Yeah.
So like for as a budget perspective, I love this deck. I think if I wanted to kind of just pick I think this is a deck you can pick up and kind of play pretty easily. I think it has a low skill ceiling and a very low skill floor if for a player who wants to try to play this out and kind of can understand the lines. I think it definitely has a high capability. Like you can break through that skill ceiling with just the repetitions, practicing of the deck because it's not the learning of the deck that's going to take a while. It's the mastering of the deck versus the meta that's going to take a while, and that just comes with time and practice, and
Yeah, and
and a little bit
I've
of
been
skill.
practicing a deck similar to this all week, and that's the cool thing. Like if with having the 4 Monkey Dory, it's basically you pick a tank deck, put Monkey Dory in, and you can repeat the process over and over. Yes, you may have to adjust the list based on the Pokemon that you're centering the main attacker around, but this is a great building block to experiment with other Pokemon as well and get used to what other interactions do.
Hmm. And then the other deck that caught my eye, because mostly because you were talking about it um, earlier in the week when you were doing the testing for this week's Rogue Deck of the Week, is this Joltik box deck. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think this Joltik box is almost the opposite of Blissey in a lot of ways, where it's a lot of low HP or lower HP Pokemon. It's definitely on the pricier side. Like again, from a budget perspective, this one's $80 compared to Blissey being just under 50. Um, but I think a lot of the cost for that deck definitely comes from this Pikachu EX that's in it. It has runs 2 copies of it
And the Pheasantipity.
and the Pheasant Dippy. But I think Pheasant Dippy's cost, a lot of players have 1 or 2 Pheasant Dippy in their collection, so that cost gets offset by just the fact that a lot of players already have it. But it's still a cost for players if you try to build it from scratch. I do completely understand that piece.
Mm-hmm.
And this one is more of a, like I said, lower HB, um, a little more aggro compared to Blissey. I think Blissey is a little more mid to late game ish and can play the
Oh
long
yeah,
game very well.
this is turn 2. You're attacking. You're getting your prizes.
Yeah, so this is, I would say this is a very, very much of a foil of the Blissey where it's almost the exact opposite. And it had a very good showing. Um, I think this archetype will grow more and more and more as this format, this set of the format, kind of grows into itself, and we're going to see more of this because it just seems too popular. I guess it's growing.
Oh yeah, and to me, when I first saw this list, I'm like, oh, this is Miraidon, but like reimagined. Because you still play the Miraidon EX, you still find ways to build your board, but it's really centered around that 30 HP Joltik, which when it first came out, we're like, oh, this is not really going to do much. I know we put that in our Blissey Galvantula deck, the item lock deck,
Yeah,
just because it helps set up that your energy so well, and that's basically what drives this deck. You start with the Joltik, you want to go second, you want to get your energy on play, and you either load up your Pikachu or Iron Hands, and then you just go boom next turn. And one really cool card I like in this list that I don't think anyone has talked about is the Iron Leaves EX. We originally saw that probably about 6 months ago, and it's been quiet ever since. But since you played that grass energy, if you go against that sneaky dark deck, because Roaring Moon EX is still out there,
Mm-hmm.
and once in a while you'll see someone playing Charizard. You put down that iron leaves, do the ability, swap up to the active, move all your energy, and boom, you're one shotting a Charizard EX or a Roaring Moon EX with very little effort.
Yeah, and it makes sense. You already run what's the energy breakdown? 5 lightning, 5 grass. Like it makes
Mm-hmm.
sense, and it sounds like it's super doable. But it's one of those Pokemon where you don't need to play if you don't want to. So it's one of those situations where I like the deck. This deck seems really fun to play. I mean I guess I say I have a lot of road decks. I think road decks are just fun to play. But it's one of those situations where this is truthfully a toolbox deck. This has a
Yep.
little bit of everything. So that means if you want to try to master this deck, you're gonna have to put a lot of time into it.
Yeah. And I will say, if you played Miraidon EX pre-rotation, learning the lines in this deck should not be hard. It's really pretty much the same lines, just with different Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, like the Pikachu EX is the same, the Miraidon EX is the same, the Iron Hands EX is the same. You're just missing the added setup, but the Joltik brings so much to your setup already. So I feel like it's not anything unusual for those players. So if you used to play that, I will go ahead and pick up those missing pieces and give it a try.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then the last deck that I want to focus on is this Lily's Clefairy EX deck.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting to me because the 1/1 Clefable in here is freaking hilarious.
I didn't even know this card existed. To be fair, no one has really talked about this deck. Everyone's been focusing on the Joltik box and on the Blissey, which understandably they got top 8. This deck just got out of top 128. It ended at like 136.
Mm-hmm.
And it's literally just Teal Mask Ogerpon with Clefairy, Lily's Clefairy EX, and it's really good against those dragon decks that we mainly see with Dragapult, Raging
Yep.
Bolt. But yeah, the Metronome Clefable. Choose one of your uh, po- opponent's active Pokemon attacks and use it as its own.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
hi Dragapult. Let me just spread damage around. Hi Gardevoir. Let me just do damage. Like it
yep,
mirrors, and I think it's because it does so well because it's so well positioned. Where the Lily's Clefairy is going to turn that Dragapult weakness into Psychic, so you're going to KO Dragapult naturally. Um,
yep.
you are mirroring the Gardevoir stuff because you guys run the same energy types, and there's a whole bunch of synergies between the decks, so that does what you need it to do. And then it just being a single prizer, even if you just steal a cheeky KO here and there, you're going to be fine. Because you're not going to put the Clefable up against something you can't use it to the most effective damage, right? You're not going to
No,
promote
yeah.
that Clefable unless you know you're going to get a KO with it.
And the cool thing with this is it runs 4 Lily's Pearl.
Mm-hmm.
So attach that to your Lily's Clefairy. You're essentially playing a single prize deck. They're
Yeah,
never getting more than one prize card unless somehow you're not drawing into this tool card. So that mixed with the Clefable, mixed with the Noctowl, which Noctowl can be a decent attacker in a pinch.
yeah. And I mean, the
Like you're
Noctowl engine
basically, yeah.
And the knockdown engine will work with the Teal Mask Ogerpon too, so you can combo your turns up very well by just having one Teal Mask Ogerpon, which becomes a draw engine, which leads you into your knockdown. Your knockdown is going to be able to get you some more items. You're going to be able to get what you need to get because you're going to be able to cherry pick from your deck. And Lily's Clefairy is only a 2-item attack, but it does 20 times the amount of bench Pokemon. You are a Terra deck. You're running Area Zero Underdefs. You're turning Dragapult and Raging Bolt's weakness into Psychic. You're just doing a whole bunch of damage against the most not even the most arguably most popular. It is the most popular deck in format. So this
Yeah.
is a anti-meta deck for sure. If Dragapult's popularity gets cut by like 30 to 40%, I think this deck dies with it. But as long as Dragapult is popular, this deck is going to be very well positioned.
I think this is super powerful against Gardevoir because if you look at Mask Ogerpon DX's attack, it deals damage based on how many
And
energy are
both.
on both actives.
Yeah.
And Gardevoir loves having tons of energy on its active. Granted, the HP on the Gardevoir attacker is not high, but say for some reason they're attacking with its own Gardevoir EX, you put up the Tilmas Ogerpon, you're doing a serious amount of damage because you have 3, they have at least 3, and yeah, it's just, you can power up even more if you have to scale up your attack if needed. I'm just looking at the other archetypes that you're expecting, but yeah, like this has a decent matchup to a lot of it on paper. I think that's maybe be a little clunky.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah. But I think with
so
it being such a big bench deck because you do run the Terra, I think the clunkiness can solve itself out just because you have more space to kind of play with. The second you
yeah,
lose to Stadium more, I think that's where the deck really struggles because it chokes itself in terms of its bench management. But if you can keep your areas your under defs open and you can expand your bench, you're going to be able to move freely and be able to do what you want to do.
yeah, and I think that the stadium war isn't that big of a deal because a lot of decks are moving to like only a 2 stadium count now.
Mm-hmm.
So let's look at the Gardevoir list. 2 Artisan, and that's it. And Brent's list, the Blissey list only plays 2 Town Store. So yeah, like a lot of decks are moving to a lower stadium count, and with you playing 3 area zeros, you're going to win that stadium war, or you're just going to or you're just going to benefit to the stadium war because a lot of decks are playing area zero as well.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's a very creative deck. I love it. You're probably going to see me play it on the channel in the near future. Um, but I'm interested to see how it's going to grow with the format because, like I said, I really do think if Dragapult and Raging Bolt's meta share just drops off a little bit. Now, I say a little bit. I'm saying still 30% is still cutting its player base by a third. It does sound like a lot. But right now, it's almost 40%. Those 2 decks are almost 40% of the meta on
Yeah,
average. So if you bring that down to 30% of the meta, the deck will struggle against its matchups, but if it's still having a positive Gardevoir matchup, still gives it some more long-term viability. But I'm interested to see how this deck's going to kind of survive because of how it is with the current meta kind of viewpoint. If the meta shifts and this deck can't counter that shift, I think you're going to see this drop off pretty drastically.
exactly. So we'll wait and see how the meta develops. We have another month with this meta going into the end of May, and then NAIC will be a completely new format with Destined Rivals, and we'll see how any of these decks really evolve or if they just drop off.
Mm-hmm.
So, got some time, got some more events coming up. I know at least 2 more regionals in the NA region. I believe there's a special event in Johannesburg this weekend. I think there's another special event in Spain.
Yeah,
So we have
Sevilla, Spain, and Johannesburg, South Africa are special events for the upcoming weekend. So it'll be
yep,
interesting to see who decides to go where. I think that's going to be part of it, and then also how each one of those tournaments will have its own meta pool and seeing how they both differentiate themselves.
exactly. So got some time, got a month to really see how this develops, and of course we will be here every single week giving our thoughts on the results and what we see and how the rogue decks make an impact with that as well. So, with all that being said, we've been seeing a lot of tournaments going through this whole entire season, and we're learning on how to become a better player because, as people that love rogue decks, we really need to hone our skills, especially against those BDIFs, because we have a lot to make up. They may have the power and consistency, but we have the uniqueness and unpredictability. So when it comes to our gameplay, we need to really know what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So on this mini series that we're doing, Devin, why don't you introduce this week's topic of our main point discussion?
Yeah, so we talked about understanding the meta a few weeks ago and understanding what is the meta, and part of that is identifying decks to be aware of, that conscious awareness. And when you play against them, They're the best decks because they have multiple lines, but they also have very unique support engines behind them and kind of different ways of getting them themselves powered up. So this week I wanted to talk about threat analysis, is what I always called it. Some people call it chess, kind of playing the game of chess, where you are looking at your opponent's board and identifying the big cog, identifying what is making that deck run in that game, and being able to understand and take out that cog to slow your opponent down. Several times you hear players talk about oh, you put me back a turn. Oh, you put me back 2 turns. That's because you're actively identifying the key piece to that board to where you are being like, okay, and the most generic example we can give, we'll go into specifics in a minute, is what's scarier? The big 300 HP EX in front of you, or the Pheasantipede on the bench that can turn their 1-card hand to 5-card hand really quickly if you knock out that big piece in front of you?
Well, that's an easy thing to answer. Of course, it's going to be the big attacker that you can knock out, and if you knock that out, they can't attack next turn, right? It's that simple. It has to be.
Unfortunately, no. And that's the crazy part. And you'd be right if we were talking about maybe less efficient decks. But we just spent a whole 20 minutes prior talking about how efficient some of these decks are with Dragapult, with the Blissey's, with the Gardevoirs, where they can just turn damage on a dime, to where in a particular board state, the example I gave is a very loaded question because you may be right. And maybe the issue is, that it's later in the game and they're out of resources and there's just information I didn't describe in the scenario where knocking out their big attacker, taking the 2 prizes, and getting you 1 step closer to your win con is the better play. But there are other situations like, what? I have this boss in hand. I have this counter catcher that's live. Let me take up that Pheasantipede. I'm still going to get the 2 prizes I want. But now you don't have a draw engine. Yeah, cool. Yeah. You have this big attacker that's going to knock me out back. But what are you going to do when I can just knock you back out? Like 3 turns later, you're getting 4 prizes, they're getting 2. Are you set up to kind of withstand the counterpunch? And obviously, a board state will determine a lot more of the nuance to that answer. But to me, the Pheasantipede is super dangerous on the board. And if I can get that out of the way in a way that doesn't put me back, I will probably try to go after the Pheasantipede more than maybe the actual attacker in front of me.
Yeah, and I like how we kind of layered out these topics because everything is kind of stacks on each other. So we talked about meta-analysis, and then next week we talked about practice. Now we're talking about like how to really combine both those skills into an actual gameplay, because to be able to understand threat analysis, you have to understand, okay, what is in the meta. And obviously there's a lot of details we left out with the scenario with Dragapult, because Dragapult is a very interesting deck where it has the option of playing 2 A-specs. So have you seen the A-spec for a turn? Was it Unfair Stamp or was it Sparkling Crystal? And that can change your decision on what you attack to and when. Mm-hmm. And then you gain comfortable with your deck, knowing your outs, knowing your lines. And that's where the practice part comes in, because yes, you can know the meta all you want, but if you don't know your deck well enough to know how I can get to the goal of like, okay, I identify the Pokemon on the bench as the biggest threat and not the active. Okay, how do I get to that Pokemon? Do I knock it out via damage with Monkey Dory? Do I have to use Counter Catcher, Boss's Orders to get that in active and just hit hard? Or do I get it in like Item Lock it, or do I Retreat Lock it to where we put them in a tough situation? And that just goes with knowing your deck, knowing the meta, and then to be able to put both those skills into this new skill that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I'm going to use the example from last week's Mamoswine video, where I was playing against a Poison Conkeldurr deck. So the group on it was the engine. And I was sitting there, I'm like, do I go after this Conkeldurr in front of me and force my opponent to try to get another stage 2 powered up that requires 0 energy? Or do I go after this Brew Bonnet and force my opponent to try to restabilize his engine? Because without the Brew Bonnet, he can't attack. Because he can't attack because he doesn't have any energy. Like, it isn't the fact that he can't attack because he's going to have to set it up. He just can't. Like, they're taking advantage of a very particular strategy. And what I did is I went after a Brew Bonnet. Now, going back and understanding the deck list, that was a riskier gamble than what I was feeling in the moment, because he probably ran 2 Brew Bonnet and just never got the second one. But I'd rather them outplay me that way than to try to go through a whole bunch of Conkeldurr. And with the Conkeldurr being like, all right, I'm just going to knock out your main attacker instead of knocking out what's powering the attack, which is the special condition. And it may be easier for them to turn on the special condition than it is to power up their Conkeldurr. And in the way the current meta is set up, I believe that's the case.
Yeah, and knowing that deck, and I watched that video. Yeah, exactly. You want to go after that Brute Bonnet because in that deck, that is the engine. That's what powers it all up. Because if they have another Conkeldurr on the bench, okay, cool. You knocked out one Conkeldurr. I'm just going to bring up the other one, do 250. I'm still ahead in prizes. But if we're making them use resources at the very least to get another Brute Bonnet with Ancient Booster Capsule in play, that's resources that they could have used to do something more efficient. But because we took out their engine, we're making them use it somewhere else. And that's just knowing the meta, knowing your line, because, okay, I know what Mammoth does. I know my outs. I know what cards I need to get. And you just combine the past 2 weeks that we talked about into the threat analysis that we're talking about this week, and you were able to execute that strategy perfectly. And I know playing online is one thing, so I kind of want to talk about a situation that I did in a tournament and at my card shop. It was actually with the Rogue Deck tournament. I was playing against an opponent playing that Slow King deck, and if you don't know what Slow King does, it has that Seeking Inspiration attack where you look at the top card of your deck and you can copy that attack. Well, it needs 2 energy to do that attack, and my opponent wasn't really having a good setup, and I saw okay, your Slowpokes and Slow Kings don't really have any energy. You have one Natu that can power up your Slow King so quickly. I'm going to go after that Natu. Granted, I know it's not a Xatu yet, but even if I get that Natu, you don't have another one. I'm making you use 2 turns to get another one in play. And just being able to slow them down enough to get my board even more set up, and that basically drove the rest of the game. So it's not just the online luck. You can take these skills and apply it to a tournament setting as well.
Yeah, and we just talked about 2 somewhat more obvious examples of kind of shutting down a setup engine. Another version of this, in terms of like an adjacent kind of thought process when it comes to threat analysis, is you're looking at your opponent's board, and sometimes you just don't have a clear-cut answer. Where if I take this, he gets behind a turn. He slows down. Like, maybe he's not going in the 5th gear now. He's going down to 3rd gear. He still has need to rev back up. There might be times where you need to do something to your opponent's board in opponent's board state while also benefiting your board state. And that can be in the terms of, like you said, either retreat locking, item locking, or just taking a secondary prize and hoping that you can get resources on your side and forcing your opponent to kind of pivot and make an audible. Because yes, if you say you boss up I'm going to go back to Dragapult, the Dracolock on the bench, you knock out the Dracolock, you only take 1 prize instead of maybe the 2 that you could from the Dragapult that was in the active. Did you slow your opponent down now where they have to restabilize a secondary attacker? And now next turn, even if you get knocked out or you could withstand the attack, you can do a return KO. Maybe that is a 3 prize and 2 turn situation, while your opponent will have to now figure out how to set up a secondary attacker, even though you took away the secondary attacker that it was building up. With this current meta being super evolution reliant, I think sometimes doing that compromise sacrifice play is going to be the best threat analysis play because you are playing more of a long-term solution instead of the short-term solution.
Exactly. I think the best way to talk about threat analysis in another gaming perspective is chess.
Yes,
And
this
the
is
reason why I
definitely
bring that up is because a lot of Pokemon players are actually very interested in learning the game of chess. Just because we do put ourselves in these situations where it's not just an obvious 2-2-2 sometimes, which some decks are like that and they do that strategy very well. But if you looked at more higher level gameplay, the turns are more complex. They're more forward thinking than what you would initially think. That's why we see Gardevoir and Dragapult being the top two decks right now. They're very forward thinking. You have to think 2, 3, 4 turns ahead of what you're doing just to kind of put the pieces in the right place so that way you can end the game really strong.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why if you hear a lot of Pokemon players, both trading card game and video game, a lot of them take a very high interest in the game of chess.
Yeah,
And maybe that's something I can look into because I tried it. I couldn't get it. But playing this game makes me realize, like, okay, it's if I want to get to the next level, I need to think of my plays further out instead of just always being reactionary.
yeah, and I played against players, and I was talking to players when I used to live in northern Georgia when I was doing more of the competitive scene, and I've heard the kind of the analogy. I'm playing chess, you're playing checkers, and that's where it is. Some players are playing much more of a simplistic game, and that's perfectly fine. Sometimes you can as if you play checkers, you can beat these complicated decks. Your linear strategy is going to be so good they can't stop you. There's some decks out there historically and even present where a linear game plan is all you need. And
Mm-hmm.
there's other decks where like, all right, I'm gonna play a more convoluted, complex strategy that has freedom to audible, and it's one of those situations where I'm a sports fan, and when I see stuff like that, I immediately kind of go back to F1 racing where I'm listening to F1 and there's teams that go, all right, time for plan 8, time for plan 9, there's time for plan 8 plus 4. And you're kind of like, what are they talking about? And that's because they sat down before the race and they crafted out 8, 10, 12, 16 strategies that they have said, all right, we have these strategies, and in any given point, we're just going to look at the information in front of us and we're going to go pivot to the next strategy and pivot to the next line. And then everyone as a team is going to operate together, being like, all right, let's execute X, let's execute Y. It's almost like when a quarterback calls an audible and everyone knows exactly what the audible is going to be. That's
Mm-hmm.
what more convoluted, kind of complex gameplay is like, because when you're getting up there in terms of your matchups, in terms of your gameplay, if you're trying to, when you get the top cut of any level of a tournament, that's what you're going to have to do. You can't just power your way through. There is no brute forcing through top level gameplay. And that's where we all want to aspire to get to. But in order to get that, we have to be able to understand these philosophies and these foundational pieces.
Exactly. And by all means, everyone is in different places, different spots in their journey as being a trading card game player in the Pokemon game. And we all start somewhere. Like I started playing the very simplistic type of decks, and I did well with them. And if you're looking for a challenge, if you're looking to elevate your gameplay, I would challenge y'all to try something that has a little bit more forward thinking. Not saying that's what you need to do at tournament play. By all, if you are super comfortable playing something a little more straightforward, like I say Sailor Edge, where okay, I get that Pokemon attach a fire energy, I do damage based on what's in my discard, boom, I'm hitting hard. No shame in that. That is a very strong deck, and if you play that, you will do well in the tournament. But if you're looking to just elevate your game a little bit, maybe during your casual time or with play testing, maybe proxy up a Guardy deck, proxy up a Dragapult deck. Try something that's different from your playstyle and that will make you challenge you to think out your turns even more and play the more chess like style versus checker like style.
Yeah, it's just one of those situations where when I first started playing, there was three very popular decks: Night March, Trevenant, and Turbo Darkrai. Turbo Darkrai is the ultra aggressive, get a whole bunch of energy on, and just hit you in the face and do a whole bunch of damage. Joltik in Night March was get a whole bunch of your 30 HP, 60 HP Pokemon into the discard pile and hit you in the face and do a whole bunch of damage. And then you had Trevenant, which was do 60, spread a whole bunch, kind of set up knockouts, do the single prize knockout. And like everyone's like, what do you do with Trevenant? Well, item lock doesn't hurt, but item lock with spread definitely puts your opponent in a position where they don't know what you're aiming for. And that's where those multiple lines were like, you know what? I'm just going to take multiple prizes because I'm going to 20, 20, 20, 20. Now you're all dead. Or, oh, I'm going to do Tree Slam and do 60 and 30. You kind of play around with the situation. And your opponent can't react to everything. And you kind of force your opponent to react to as many options as possible. And then you have the option that can't. That's what threat analysis is. So the aim of it is to do what I hear a lot of people say is the checkmate move, right? You want to put your opponent in the checkmate, where they are in a no-win situation.
So, with all that being said, I think it's time to really put this into practice. So, I think it's a good time to talk about this week's Road Deck of the Week. What do you think, Devin?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for this week's Road Deck of the Week, the way you've been telling me how practice has been going with it.
Yeah, it's definitely been interesting. I have my highs and I have my lows. So this week's Road Deck of the Week is the Iono's Electric Deck. Not sure what the actual deck name is, but it is centered around the Iono's trainer Pokemon with Voltorb, Bellibolt, and Kilowattrel. So if y'all don't know what these Pokemon do, which I don't blame you because no one's really been talking about this list. So the Voltorb has an attack for two energy.
Yeah, it's 2 lightning energy.
Sorry, what?
2 lightning energy, right?
Oh yeah, 2 lightning. Yeah, everything is. We only play lightning energy in this deck, and you'll see why. And it's Voltaic Chain, 20 plus, and it does 20 more damage for every lightning energy attached to your Iono's Pokemon. So we play nothing but Iono's Pokemon in this list except for one Skwovet. And that's because Kilowattrel is the replacement for B-Barrel. And actually works so well in this deck. So the other Pokemon in this deck is the Iono's Kilowattrel, which evolves from Iono's Wattrel. And it has a flashing draw ability where it says that if you discard a lightning energy from this Pokemon, you can draw until you have 6 cards in hand. So, sounds a little bit familiar.
And you can stack that with multiple Kilowattrel per turn, correct?
Exactly. So as long as that Pokemon has energy attached to them, you can stack it. That's why the Skwovet is so good in this list. Because theoretically, you want 2 Kilowattrels and 1 Skwovet, and you kind of just repeat the B-Barrel Skwovet all over again. And really, it may be better because you're drawing 1 more card with it, so you're getting 6 instead of 5.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you can get your energy in play is with the Iono's Bellibolt EX, which has the Electric Streamer ability, where you can attach lightning energy to your Iono's Pokemon as much as you want.
So you just flood your board of electric energy.
Exactly. It's an energy flood deck. We play 19 lightning energy in this list. So it's very easy to get your energy on board if you're drawing well. And basically, you want the Voltorb be your main attacker. Load up the energy on your board with the Bellibolt EX. Draw as much as you can with the Kilowattrel. And then you just have to recycle the electric energy. And you do that in several ways in this list. You do that you have Super Rod, obviously. You play the new Stadium Levincia, where it says that you can get 2 lightning energy from your discard and put it in your hand. So you can recycle that way as well. And you play 1 Superior Energy Retrieval, so you can get 4 more energy. So it's just learning how to use how much energy you have in play and really spread it out so that way you're not losing all your energy at once. So it's very much energy fled, learning how to put your energy in appropriate spaces where you can still attack next turn and really try to force that single prize game with only attacking with the Voltorb. And you can attack with the Bellibolt if you have to. It does 230, which is really not bad. It hits into a lot of EX Pokemon for perfect math. But try and recycle Voltorb as much as you can and just hit hard and just win on the prize trade.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's giving attention to End Zoroark and the Ends list. I thought this was the better trainer deck coming out of Journeys Together, and it's just I think it suffers from the fact that people don't want to practice with it, and it also obviously suffers from the fact that you're relying on very much low HP single prize Pokemon. So it's
Mm-hmm.
something that it's a risk that a lot of people don't want to take, and I don't blame them. Like
Mm-hmm.
Voltorb being your primary attacker isn't the most flashy thing in the world by any means, but it can hit like a truck.
Yes, because of Dragapult, this deck is in a very hard position because the Voltorb can survive the Phantom Dive if it's on the bench. Your Tadbulbs and your Wattrels cannot, and your Skwovet cannot. So all your other setup Pokemon, unless you go first and you can evolve really quick, you're already at a disadvantage with the type of decks that are out there with Dragapult, with Monkey Dory, with all the energy or all the damage spread attacks right now. So you have to be a little more aggressive with this. You want to get your energy going, get to a point where you're you're basically going to win the prize trade, and you really want to try and lean into the single prize trade versus sacrificing the Bellibolt. Once in a while is okay to do it, but as long as that you can go back to the Voltorb, it's I don't know, it's just hard. It can hit like a truck, but it can also only tickle you at the same time. It just depends on how your hand is. I remember playing some games and I drew a Skwovet with 5 lightning energy, and my next 3 draws were lightning energy. It's just playing something where almost a 30-year deck is energy. It can get clunky at times.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. But the deck list will be in the description of the video and the show notes as well. And then
Mm-hmm.
on Friday at noon Eastern, we'll have a showcase video of the deck and kind of showing how it can go in action. And it's just one of those where I thought all the trainers Pokemon had really good archetypes kind of pre-cooked into Journeys Together. And I am excited for us to try every single one and kind of see how Pokemon wanted us to play the game.
Yes.
Because obviously we've done Like and Rock, we've done Mamoswine, we've showcased Blaziken a little bit, but now I think it's going to be fun. I'm excited for the trainer Pokemon that I'm wanting to play and test with, and I know you had a lot of fun with the Iono, so let's just kind of play around, journey together a little bit more, see what was supposed to be the highlights of the set, and kind of go from there.
Yeah, and if y'all want to, we did showcase the trainer cards in our live stream about a month ago. So if you want to go back to the live stream, feel free to take a look at that. This was featured in our first game with Lycanroc. Joe played the Iono's deck. He was actually really excited for this. I played Lycanroc. The Lycanroc is a not a good matchup for this because of weakness, but it was still a fun game. That was actually very close, and we were able to show off both those decks. But yeah, all the trainer Pokemon were in the live stream, so go ahead and go back and watch that. Let us know your thoughts. And yeah, once this releases on Friday, let us know what changes you would make to this list. Let's put like the video, put a comment. We will respond to you. And with all that being said, Devin, do you have any final words for our listeners with this week's episode?
No, like I said, I'm intrigued on how the meta is going to evolve. I think looking at the meta and looking at these results, we have two big tournaments coming up this upcoming weekend from time of recording, and I'm just excited to see how us as players will evolve and be able to handle the matchups and be able to maybe rein in and pull in Dragapult and Guardy from the rest of the pack and be able to just see how everything kind of stabilizes itself, or it just re-cements itself. We don't know. I'm intrigued to see what happens in the future.
Yeah, me too. With 2 more tournaments coming up, and I think there's another Champions League that will show us how Team Rocket Pokemon will be. So we'll get a glimpse of that in the next couple weeks as well, I believe. But yeah, if you made it this far in our podcast, thank you for listening. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like the video, subscribe to us. We're looking into growing our channel and excited to do more and more videos for y'all. But yeah, thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Rogue Deck Chronicles. And as always, have fun playing those sneaky decks.
Bye, guys.